Yaśodā-nandana Hare Krishna, all glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda. We want to welcome everyone today to our weekly Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam class. Venkat, is Yaśodā-nandana present yet on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, excellent. Later in the class, we're going to discuss a few issues that came up yesterday in the class where one of our members disagreed with a couple of our statements that were made in regards to one, the reading of Śrīla Prabhupāda's books exclusively. This is something that some people in the ISKCON movement and outside of the ISKCON movement do not accept as a truth. They think that you can just read any books and shastras, and that'll be sufficient. It's possible to bring this quote up online right now that he sent to me, which specifically designates his disciples to read his books exclusively.
Sure, I think you're talking about the purport.
Yes,
Madhya Lila
please.
22 chapter.
Could you read it out for us, Venkat, please?
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
So actually in this translation, it says, so these are the, I think, instructions for devotees. Number 14 is one should not partially study many scriptures just to be able to give references and expand explanations. And in the purport, it says, one should not partially study a book just to pose oneself as a great scholar by being able to refer to scriptures. In our Krishna Consciousness movement, we have therefore limited our study of Vedic literatures to Bhagavad Gita, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is Nectar of Devotion. These 4 works are sufficient for preaching purposes. They're adequate for the understanding of the philosophy and the spreading of missionary activities all over the world. If one studies a particular book, he must do so thoroughly. That is the principle. By thoroughly studying a limited number of books, one can understand the philosophy.
Okay, so this was the question that was raised by Ulysses to me after the class. I just wanted to let everyone know that this is the answer that we give. It's, maybe he misunderstood. And there are multiple quotes to support this principle of studying exclusively Prabhupada's books, namely these 4. Now, I asked him in a private conversation later, have you read, actually another member of the group here, I asked him specifically, have you read? He goes, oh, you should read this book by Jiva Goswami, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam or Bhagavat Sandarbha or some book like that. And so this Bhakta asked me that question. I asked him this simple question, Jiva Goswami. I asked him, have you read all of Prabhupada's books yet? And the answer was no. So there is no debate with our group, by the way, in this regards. We're not a political group. We're not trying to represent our own philosophy or our own point of view. We are representing Prabhupada's point of view. And if there are any questions in regards to that, if you're going to disagree with the statements that we're using to support Prabhupada's statements and directions that he's given us, then we can see that this is an issue that we can deal with accordingly. The other issue, and we'll deal with it at the end of the class, is because it may be a longer topic or in future programs, is the question of Diksha Siksha Guru. I think it was Bhakta Ron Singh brought up the point a few weeks back about if you're not a pure devotee, you can't be a Siksha Guru. You can't teach people either. So that's another issue that we'll deal with at the end of the class, and refer to some quotes from Śrīla Prabhupāda to give people a better understanding of the relationship between God brothers and how we can work together as a harmonious team in our efforts to present Krishna consciousness to the general public. I was speaking to Venkat, this current time is a very difficult time for many people because of all the confusion that's going on in the Vaishnava world. And if you're aware of all the issues, you realize that there are lots of different opinions on this point, that point, that are circulating amongst the group of the devotee community worldwide. And in many cases, it's a war of words. A war of words. So this is going on, unfortunately, due to many philosophical misunderstandings amongst so many different God brothers and God sisters, so many different opinions. So our goal is to represent Prabhupada's words as authoritatively and scripturally as possible for our group. and to equip us all with the necessary information to help us establish Prabhupada as Siksha Diksha Guru. And to the other reason why we're doing this is to make sure that people respect Prabhupada's instructions not to read other books, or to read books, or to have his books changed by independent God brothers for whatever motive they did against his instructions, changing his books. So these questions we can continue to discuss in other programmings that will be launching on Prabhupada TV. And we're not here to tell people don't have an opinion or don't ask a question. Of course, we want people to do that and to have a stimulating conversation. But if it's against Prabhupada's directions, if it's against Prabhupada's instructions, as we understand them, then that may be a difficulty for those people to participate with us. So taking that into consideration, we'll move forward with Yaśodā-nandana Prabhu and today's Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam class.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Naram Cheva Narottamam. Naram Cheva Narottamam. Devim Saraswatim Vyasam. Devim Saraswatim Vyasam. Tato Jayam Mudirayet. Tato Jayam Mudirayet. One should utter the means of conquest, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, after offering respectful obeisances, 1, to the personality of Godhead Narayana, 2, to the Narayana Rishi, who is the supermost human being, 3, to the Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, then to Śrīla Vyasadeva, then 4, to Śrīla Vyasadeva, the author. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 18 describes Nashta Prayeshu Vabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regular attendance in the Bhagavat class or rendering service unto the pure devotees, all that is inauspicious in the heart of a candidate becomes destroyed almost to nil, and thus loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental song, comes into being an irrevocable fact. So today we'll be reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, text number 5.
Text number 6 today.
Text number 6.
Yes.
Rishaya uchuhu tvaya kalu puranani seti hasani cha anaga akyatina pi aditani dharmashastrani yaniutam. Rishaya, the sages, uchuhu, said, tvaya, by you, kalu, undoubtedly, Puranani, supplementary to the Vedas with illustrious narration, Seti Hasani, with the histories also, Cha, and Anaga, freed from all vices, Akyatani, explained, Api, although, Aditani, well read, Dharmashastrani, scriptures giving right directions to progressive life. Yani, all these, Uta said, translation by Śrīla Prabhupāda. The sages said, respected Sutta Goswami, you are completely freed from all vices. You are well versed in all the scriptures that are famous for religious life, as well as in the Puranas and histories, as you have gone through them under proper guidance, as also explained them. Purport by Śrīla Prabhupāda. A Goswami, or the rightful representative of Śrīla Vyasadeva, must be free from all kinds of vices. The preliminary vices are: 1, illicit connection with women; 2, indulgence of unnecessary animal slaughter; 3, to live a life of intoxication; and 4, endeavoring in the matter of speculative gambling of all descriptions. A Goswami, therefore, is freed from all these symptomatic uncleanness before he can dare to sit on the Vyasāsana. Nobody should be allowed to sit on the Vyasāsana who is not spotless in character, with special reference to the above 4 principles. He shall not only be freed from all such vices, but also he must be well versed in all revealed scriptures or the Vedas. The Puranas are also part of the Vedas, and histories like the Mahabharata or Ramayana are also parts of the Vedas. The Acharya or the Goswami must be well acquainted with all these literary fields. To hear and explain them is more important than reading. One can assimilate the knowledge of the revealed scriptures by hearing and explaining. Hearing is called Shravana, and explaining is called Kirtana. Therefore, these 2 processes, namely Shravan and Kirtan, are 2 principal factors in the progressive spiritual life. One who has properly grasped the transcendental knowledge from the right source by submissive hearing only can properly explain the subject. So this is a very important text from Śrīla Prabhupada. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Bhakti Siddhanta Shishyaya Bhaktivedanta Namine Prasannaya Prashantaya Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Bhagavad Vandanam Khadyam Guru Vandana Purvakam Kshiram Sharkara Yuktam Kadatehi Visheshatahan Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Sri Rup Sanatana Bhattara Gunata Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunatha. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Śrīla Prabhupada, my spiritual master, who has opened my eyes from the darkness of ignorance with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. So this is a very important verse from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Here the sages are addressing Sutta Goswami and saying to him, you are completely freed from all vices. You are well versed in all the scriptures that are famous for religious life, as well as in the Puranas and histories, as you have gone through them under proper guidance, as also explained them. And Śrīla Prabhupada goes on, who is qualified to sit on the Vyasāsana. Now, this is an important point because as we saw in the history of our movement, specifically after Śrīla Prabhupada's manifested presence, after 14th of November, 1977, various individuals arranged to have large Vyasasanas placed in Śrīla Prabhupada's temples. Now, Śrīla Prabhupada is describing here who is qualified to sit on a Vyasasana. Now, there's a difference. During Prabhupada's presence, somebody may argue that devotees who gave classes on the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam were allowed to sit on an elevated seat on the honor of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, also speaking the philosophy representing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. That is different than putting a permanent seat and claiming to be an appointed Acharya. Now, Śrīla Prabhupada is making general statements here, and it's important to basically understand the issue. There's an incident that took place in 1970 where one devotee invited an Indian guest to sit on Prabhupada's Vyasāsana. And Prabhupada wrote in a letter dated May 16, 1970, with reference to your letter dated 14th May, I am surprised how you allowed Mr. Parikh to sit on the Vyasāsana. You know that Vyasāsana is meant for the representative of Vyasadeva, the spiritual master. But Mr. Parikh does not come in the parampara to become the representative of Vyasa. Neither he has any sound knowledge of Vaishnava principles. I understand from your letter that sometimes discussions on Aurobindo philosophy are done by Mr. Parikh from the Vyasāsana. So I'm a little surprised. How did you allow like this? I think you should rectify immediately all these mistakes as stated by you in the last two lines of your letter. I think the best thing to do is to stop his class. Nonsense ought not to be tolerated. Again, the foregoing is from a letter dated May 16, 1970. In another letter in 1970, on the 25th of August, 1970, Śrīla Prabhupada describes Śrīla Vyasadeva is the original spiritual master for anyone who is following the Vedic way of spiritual realization. Spiritual master is the representative of Vyasadeva because he carries the message of Vyasadeva throughout the world. As you know it very well, that Vyasadeva compiled all Vedic literatures wonderfully. Sometimes so-called realist philosophers do not believe that there was any person of the name Vyasadeva. Their opinion is that any person distributing the Vedic knowledge is called a Vyasadeva. This class of philosophers, generally being impersonalists, cannot appreciate how one man could write so many books. Actually, it is astonishing. Before Vyasadeva, all the Vedic scriptures were taught and received verbally by the disciplic succession. Both the students and the spiritual master of those ages were so sharp in their memory that once they heard the transcendental message from the spiritual master, the message was immediately imprinted in their brain as vivid as a written language. For example, Shukadeva Goswami was narrating Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam extemporaneously. The whole Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 18,000 verses, very difficult to pronounce even, and what to speak of memorizing, were narrated very easily, just like reading some printed book. He narrated the whole subject matter of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam continuously for 7 days. And Maharaj Parikshit also understood the subject matter very clearly. Both of them were so meritorious that they attained the highest goal of life, namely the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, simply by reciting and hearing respectively. Of course, that time was just the moment when Kali, the predominant deity of the present age, was peeping to infiltrate into worldly affairs, and later on it was complete through the exigency of an upstart Brahma boy. So Vyasadeva was a real person, accepted by all authorities, and anyone can judge how wonderful he was to compile the Vedic literatures. He is therefore known as Mahamuni. Muni means thoughtful, or great thinker, or great poet. And Maha means still greater. So there is no comparison with Vyasadeva with any writer or thinker or philosopher. Nobody can estimate the scholarly importance of Śrīla Vyasadeva. He composed many millions of Sanskrit verses, and we are just trying to receive a fragmental knowledge out of them by our tiny efforts only. Śrīla Vyasadeva therefore summarized the whole Vedic knowledge in the shape of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which is known as the ripened fruit of the desired tree known as Vedic knowledge. The ripened fruit is received hand to hand through disciplic succession. And anyone who does this work in disciplic succession from Śrīla Vyasadeva is considered as representative of Vyasadeva. And as such, the bona fide spiritual master's appearance day is worship as Vyasa Puja. Not only that, the exalted seat on which the spiritual master sits is also called Vyasāsana. In the Mayavadi Sampradaya, they observe the Guru Purnima Day to offer respect to the spiritual master. This system of offering respect to the spiritual master is current in all sections of Vedic followers. But so far we are the Gaudiya Sampradaya. So far we, the Gaudiya Sampradaya is concerned, we offer on the appearance day of the spiritual master our humble homage annually. And this particular auspicious moment is called Vyasa Puja. I have received the painting of my Guru Maharaj. It is very nicely done. Please convey my thanks to the girl. I have immediately placed this painting on my deity altar. Yes, this attitude of surrendering to the spiritual master is the best qualification of spreading this movement of Lord Chaitanya. That is the Vedic way. One should have unflinching faith in Krishna and similarly in the spiritual master. That is the way of understanding the secret of Krishna consciousness. Unfortunately, an attempt has been made lately in our society to shake this formula. And Prabhupada goes on and he says, there are two verses in a Chanyastla sloka, how a family or an institution can be glorified or burnt into ashes by one person. The Chanakya Pandit says, if there is one tree in a forest, producing nice aromatic flower, that one tree can glorify the whole forest by the flavor of its flower. Similarly, if there is one tree in whose cavity there is a little fire, that one tree can burn into ashes the whole forest. So this simile is applicable anywhere. In a family, if there is one good boy, he can glorify the whole family. And similarly, if there is a bad boy, he can turn the whole family to ashes. Similarly, in this institution, if there is a bad disciple, he can burn the whole institution into ashes. The governing body commission's duty is therefore to see that every member is following the rules and regulations and chanting 16 rounds regularly on the beads. I hope the GBC, in cooperation with the sannyasis in their touring program, will be able to keep vigilant systematically in order to keep the society as pure as possible. August 25th, 1970. So the reason I took to reading this letter, for one thing, Śrīla Prabhupada is describing many very important points about the importance of Vyasadeva. Many times, some of our devotees, as it was described earlier by Viśvakarmā Prabhu, they like to read different translations of books, different commentaries on books, which on one hand, Prabhupada once made a statement to Achyutananda when this discussion came up, whether Prabhupada had said that we should read other Acharya's books. And Prabhupada said that I never made any statement to the effect that we should not read their commentaries. But then part of the discussion is Prabhupada said, first read our books. First read my books. When we consider the literary production of Śrīla Prabhupada, he's given all the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Bhagavad Gita, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Ishopanishad, Easy Journey to Other Planets, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so many different, now they have the collected Bhagavad Gita lectures, they have the collected Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam lectures, thousands of letters. Now, if somebody has not read all of that and studied all that, now there's a difference between cursory general reading and analytical study. If somebody has read it, it's nice. Then the next step is to engage in deeper study. Prabhupada gave all of this knowledge so that his devotees and disciples and followers would take advantage of it. Now, if somebody wants to jump and go to other Acharya's commentaries without first studying Śrīla Prabhupada, that is disrespectful. That is not appropriate. That is offensive. One cannot overpass the current Acharya. Prabhupada is still the current authoritative Acharya who is giving the transcendental knowledge. Now, this point about being a good disciple before one can dare sitting on a Vyasāsana, this is a very important point, because when we tried to have some discussions with some of the leading members of the society in 1978-79, with regards that sitting on a Vyasāsana in front of Śrīla Prabhupada in his temple is offensive, many of them could not accept that. Their idea was, well, Prabhupada did it, we can do it. Well, sorry, sir, you're not Prabhupada. Prabhupada slept 2 hours a night. Prabhupada translated all these books. Prabhupada traveled all over the world like that, established 108 temples. One senior disciple of Śrīla Prabhupada in Vrindavan made a comment, first let them establish 108 temples, make commentaries on all these literatures, go all around the world, do that, and then you can dare think about sitting on a Vyasāsana. But no, the fever was too high. And again, last time we were discussing, why is it that we have so many devotees with so many different interpretations? And the answer was given that the disease is personal ambition, the pod problem. Pod problem means the profit, adoration, and distinction disease. That is the problem. That was the root cause of the problem. We don't find any instruction in the last few months of Śrīla Prabhupada's manifested presence from April of 1977 till the 14th of November 1977, where Prabhupada has ever discussed putting Vyasasanas in his temple, big titles, big pranam mantras, all of these things. None of this was discussed by Śrīla Prabhupada. Why? Was any of his disciples on that platform? Oh, some people thought they were. Some people right now probably still think they are. Well, anybody can have whatever thoughts they want. Anybody can choose to be a legend in their own minds. That's okay. And everybody is entitled to their pious beliefs. But a reality is given in Śrīla Prabhupada's instructions, like in this purport. It is just like in the last purport, we are describing how all bona fide representative of Sri Vyasadeva in the right chain of disciplic succession are to be understood as Goswamis, because such Goswamis restrain all the senses from being deviated from the path of previous acharyas. Now, somebody may argue, well, it says in the Upadeshamitra, Vacho Vegam, Kuroda Vegam, like that, somebody who has full control over the 6 urges. But one problem they have is you don't have control over the tongue. You can't even repeat what Śrīla Prabhupada has given. Prabhupada has given these books, and one of the first things that these ambitious fellows did is to change his books. You could not control your tongue and repeat what Prabhupada has given. You change what Prabhupada has given. You've manufactured different interpretations on what Prabhupada has given. That is not acceptable. That is not bona fide. He has seen the truth is the bona fide understanding. They have seen the truth is a concoction. So this is a very important point, because we see so many devotees have so many different interpretations of Prabhupada's teachings. And the first of these misinterpretations is this bogus idea that some people think that they were authorized to change the books under the plea of editing and grammatical embellishment. No, you're not authorized to do that. As a matter of fact, in 1977, when Prabhupada found out that changes had been made to his first edition books, Prabhupada said the next printing should be again the original way. Now, you don't need to be a PhD in English and grammar to understand that. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. It's not complicated. Just remain faithful to Śrīla Prabhupada. Now, if somebody say, well, there is some typing mistakes or there's some capitalization mistakes, yeah, there may be a few mistakes here and there, but not to the extent that you have 21,000 changes in the first 4 cantos of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Just leave it. Prabhupada said the next printing again should be the original way. Just follow that. When Prabhupada says that they cannot change anything, that is not difficult to understand. But when personal ambition comes in, then it becomes very difficult to understand. Very difficult to understand. How is it that in the history of all these different Vaishnava Vedic Sampradayas, that they don't have any record anywhere of one Acharya changing the works of his previous Acharya? And anybody who knows a little bit about Sanskrit knows that you can change different combination of words and mixing of words and things like that. It will not alter the meaning, but you can change things. But none of them have dared to do that. I was in Sri Rangam one time. We were staying in the house of Rangaraj Bhattar, who was the Pradhanarchaka, the main priest of the entire Sri Rangam temple. And I asked him the question, in your Sampradaya, you have so many different literatures and commentaries on Vedanta Sutra and other literatures. Did any Acharya ever try to adjust or change? And they put their ears, they put their hands to their ears. Oh, no, nobody can do that. Nobody can touch. Nobody can touch. Same thing with these Madhvas and Udupi. They have a big library of all different kinds of commentaries and palm leaves. They have the original commentaries on palm leaves of Madhvacharyas. Madhvacharya didn't write physically. He had one of his disciples, Rishikesh Tirtha. He dictated to him and he wrote on these long palm leaves with black ink. It's still there after 900 years. I asked one of their Brahmins, did anybody ever try to change? No. Oh, you cannot do that. They have that much respect. In our movement, no. They want to change. Prabhupada complained. I was there in 1977, where Prabhupada requested one devotee to go from Vrindavan to Mathura. And he requested him to go to a specific pharmacy to get a specific medicine. He gave him money. He told him how much it should cost. He says, go get that medicine. The devotee came back, he went to the wrong pharmacy, got the wrong medicine, paid the wrong price. Prabhupada went afterwards, when he got that, he said, this is the disease with you Westerners, this constant changing, always trying to change instruction. This is a disease. In India, they don't have the traditional bona fide sampradayas. They don't have that disease. But in our movement, that disease is very deep, along with many other things that have affected the spiritual lives of many individuals. So this is very important to study very carefully every one of Prabhupada's statements and carefully understand. First, we have to study Prabhupada's books, Prabhupada's purports, Prabhupada's lectures, Prabhupada's instructions. And after all of that, after one has read and studied, then one may venture outside but also another point is, who has translated these various literatures? Are they self-realized souls? Are they liberated souls? Are they bona fide Vaishnava-acharyas? Were these translations approved by Śrīla Prabhupada? That is another question people should resolve. Anyway, I want to open the discussion early today because leave some time for devotees to make comments and everything else. Go ahead, Viśvakarmā, you have a comment? Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. I did want to mention that this misunderstanding that some of our godbrothers had about the roles they should take in managing Prabhupada's society after his departure have caused chaos in the mission that Prabhupada established. Prabhupada actually was quoted in saying that after the loss of the great Acharya, after the loss of such a personality, chaos usually enters into the environment of that organization or institution. This is not only the case in ISKCON, but in many different groups that are established by certain people. When the leadership is gone, then everyone scrambles to get, how can I say, a piece of the empire. In the case of the ISKCON movement, when Prabhupada was leaving his body, the GBC were meeting, the GBC at that time were meeting to discuss how to divide the world up. They were already plotting that scheme. And subsequently, after Prabhupada's demise, these different gurus came to Toronto. Satsrup, Kirtananda, Tamal Krishna, Hansaduda, etc., all trying to get the Toronto temple, because it was a prize temple in the mission, to get it as part of their zonal guru system, which was what the GBC were doing to administer the mission after Prabhupada's departure. In another situation, Bhavananda, after Prabhupada had left, he came to Vrindavan, and a friend of mine who was the head pujari there from Toronto, Drupada Prabhu, he was in charge of the budget for the pujari department. So money was put aside specifically for deity worship, not for the kitchen, for the cooking of prasadam, not for the maintenance of the buildings, but specifically for the deity worship. So Bhavananda, who is still, despite his crimes against children and against the disciplic succession of our spiritual master, is still residing in Mayapur, much to the disappointment of many of the God brothers. But at any rate, getting back to the story, they decided that they were going to take over, and Yaśodā-nandana Prabhu was there in Vrindavan, so he can speak about it as well. They decided, everyone, that they would erect 11 Vyasāsanas for these 11 Ritvik gurus and put them in the temple room in Vrindavan. Now, they were also assimilating or incorporating new names right away. Kirtananda became Śrīla Bhaktipada. And there are all kinds, I won't go over the names, all these different names, Śrīla this, Śrīla that, Śrīla this. So there was so much ambition going on. Venkat, it was amazing how much false ego was manifesting in these people. Now, they didn't have enough money to erect the Vyasāsanas in the temple budget. So Bhavananda went to Drupada Prabhu and told him, take the money out of the deity puja and use that money to erect the Vyasāsanas for all of us in Krishna Balaram Mandir. A very tragic turn of events that took place. And of all the problems that exist in the society, this major problem of trying to usurp the position of the pure devotee has done more to create chaos in the mission of Lord Chaitanya and Śrīla Prabhupada than any other thing. Everything stems back to this major problem of profit, adoration, and distinction that certain people at that time were infected with. And if you look at the history, everyone, you'll see what happened to many of them. Jayatirtha had his head severed by one of his disciples with a knife. That Kirtananda was beaten almost to death with a pipe, a lead pipe, by one of his disciples. Plus, he was imprisoned for many years in jail, and then died in India, banished from the ISKCON movement for his offenses. So we won't go over all the issues that have gone on with these people as a result of these offenses. But these offenses of trying to usurp the position of Prabhupada are very tragic. Yesterday, I was criticized by some people online for being a so-called Ritvik. And little do they understand what the meaning of Ritvik is, or the position of initiation in the Krishna Consciousness movement. All we're saying is that Prabhupada is Siksha and Diksha Guru. Where is the fault? Tell me where the fault is. There is no fault. But do people accept? No, they don't accept that. And again, every day, these issues are coming up. The reading of different books. I saw a group of devotees in England. There was a podcast yesterday. I mentioned to Vincott. And some Shivaram disciple was being interviewed by, I don't know who he was, looked like some karmi, he claiming to be a devotee. And they were discussing what they're going to do now that the ISKCON movement is collapsing philosophically, especially with the comments that have been made by these various people in the role of Diksha Guru, who are speaking philosophically incorrect statements about child protection, namely the Shivaram, who incidentally was a devotee in Montreal when I joined. I helped him become a disciple of Śrīla Prabhupāda. I was his Vartma Pradarshika guru. I introduced him to the holy name. So he has made various statements which have caused this schism in his own group in Hungary, because he spoke Hungarian, although he was living in Montreal, going to McGill University, studying engineering. Eventually, after some years of development, he decided he would leave America and go to Hungary, and he built this quite nice community there for Krishna consciousness. And he's made these statements now in the year 2022, these letters. And incidentally, I wanted to mention, Prabhupada said this: you can say anything and you can deny it, but don't write it down. So in this particular case, I mean, that's a simple common sense principle in every field of life. You can really speak and deny it. Joe Biden lies all the time and nobody does anything. If you write it down, there it is in black and white. So he wrote these letters, and I think everyone in this group should read them and see how many contradictions of philosophy are being made in his two letters that he sent out in regards to the dealings with Bhaktivedanta, this other so-called sannyasi guru. So in conclusion, this guru issue of trying to become the Acharya or the authority in Krishna consciousness without having a proper realization of who you are and what your position is, has caused all this chaos in the ISKCON movement. Yaśodā-nandana Prabhu, if you'd like to further compliment or state, discuss this, and then we could continue to open the floor to the group of devotees that are assembled here today.
Many devotees ask questions sometimes, what is the use of these kind of discussions? And people say, well, this has been discussed so much before. Well, it's been discussed, but many devotees are still very confused about the proper understanding of Prabhupada's position and their own position. What is the position of the bona fide Sampradaya-Acharya, like Śrīla Prabhupada? We say currently that Prabhupada is the current Acharya, the current supreme authority in the matter of Vaishnava teachings for this movement. They say, no, he can't be because he's not living. He's not physically present. Well, he is present. Well, he's present in his murti, present in his pictures, and he's present in his Vani incarnation, in his books. And those individuals who are trying to promote their vapu, their body, instead of promoting Prabhupada's Vani, this is a bad mistake. that mistake can be stopped right now. They can stop it today by returning back to the instruction and the authorized system prescribed by Śrīla Prabhupada. It is not very complicated. It's just if there is no personal motivation, it's easy to understand. Anyway, let's open the floor. People can ask questions, make remarks and comments, and let's go forward. Hare Krishna. Anybody has any remarks or questions?
Venkat, please.
Yes, Prabhu. With your permission, I would like to share something which I found on Facebook just yesterday, and it's symptomatic of what we're talking about, of thinking of Śrīla Prabhupada as an ordinary person. And if we think that way, then people think, oh, I can also become like him. So I just want to, if you don't mind,
Please.
This is published in the ISKCON Communications Journal. So this is an official, I think, ISKCON communication, and this is the latest edition of it. I hope you can see my screen. So this is an article by a senior disciple of Śrīla Prabhupada, Garuda Prabhu, Graham M. Schweg, you might know him. He's a scholar of Sanskrit and all that. But this is what he thinks about Śrīla Prabhupada. He says, despite this sacred otherworldly quality to Prabhupada's teachings, to non-practitioners in the modern West, the non-followers, so many of his statements all too easily appear as rather culturally biased, colonialist influenced, and unfounded historically, politically, psychologically, and scientifically. He's saying Śrīla Prabhupada talks nonsense. That's what unfounded means, right? And what to speak of statements that sound patently misogynistic, homophobic, and racist. So this is what he thinks about Śrīla Prabhupada. He's saying non-followers may think that way. Such non-followers often wonder how his Western disciples can even accept, much less appreciate such statements. Now, later on, he goes on, thus, when this descending Uttama Bhagavat makes remarks that are clearly informed or influenced by surrounding culture and environs, they can be understood as such. He's saying that Śrīla Prabhupada was born at a certain time and place in a certain culture, and he was influenced by that culture. And when he talks, he's influenced by that culture. So we should look beyond that. That's what he's saying here. Next, even while knowing that such statements may very well come from the Uttam Bhagavat setting, the student's focus should be on the pure intention behind statements despite the non-essential content or teachings. He's saying the statements are non-essential. I mean, forget about what he's saying. Look at the intention behind what Prabhupada is saying. I mean, what kind of this is so offensive to Śrīla Prabhupada, is my opinion. And this is in the official ISKCON Communications Journal. So I just wanted to share that.
That's a very important point. This is the problem with many devotees analyzing Prabhupada's controversial statements in the light of modern Western ideas. For example, this feminism. There's a lot of statements from Śrīla Prabhupada about the role and position of women in society. Like, for example, that women should be protected at all times. Now, this goes contrary to modern popular ideas that women should be independent, women are equal to men, this and that. And Prabhupada raised the issue one time, so that this propaganda was invented by men to take advantage of women. That men would have cheap illicit sex, get the women pregnant, and then abandon them, and then they have to go to the government, beg for money to maintain the child. There are many important conversations with Śrīla Prabhupada with regards to that. That's why in the Vedic system, women are protected. They're supposed to be protected by their husband. When a husband is not there, by their son or some relative, there has to be a system to protect them. But this idea runs contrary to modern popular thinking of feminism and women independence and everything. So there are many such things. It's just like the idea that the homophobic. Well, it may be a very popular idea in modern society, but this is not Vedic. Prabhupada is explaining the Vedic transcendental standard. And when Prabhupada made these comments about certain tendencies in human society, like illicit sex or this and that, it's not that he manufactured some idea. This is from the Bhagavatam. In the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, there's the story where this homosex came from. Brahma was attacked by some male members, and then it described in the Bhagavatam how this was the beginning of this homosexual tendency in human society. So there's a lot of things that are not popular with modern materialistic sense gratification culture. But it doesn't mean that the philosophy should be compromised and Prabhupada should be criticized to fit into people's modern views. And Prabhupada one time wrote a letter that we should preach to change the public, not that we should change to accommodate the public. Now, my question with these scholarly devotees who are trying to analyze this like that, whether or not they've properly understood Prabhupada's teachings. Because by criticizing Śrīla Prabhupada and trying to modify his teaching or his presentation of the Vedic teachings, they're not showing the greatest degree of discrimination and intelligence. What have they understood? Why don't they go to the actual system of Shastras like the Manusmriti, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Vedas to present that? I mean, because otherwise you would have a philosophy that would be dismantled very quickly to try to accommodate every group, every fantasy, every whimsical political idea, everything like that. So, any other comments? That was a very good point, Venkat. Very good point that you brought up.
I do, until somebody else comes up with a comment, I did want to mention that within the ISKCON group, they have begun to accept with some of these gurus, homosexual behavior. Now, this is a certainly not a practice, especially if you're operating a brahmachari ashram. I had an experience when I was president in Toronto that I used to allow people to, all of us brahmacharis, we would sleep together up in my office. So there were different sections of the temple where you could take rest, but there was a group of us that were staying, they could stay with me in my office. I had that setup. So one evening, one of the brahmacharis tried to violate me. Now, I was quite shocked. And I thought, okay, this couldn't be possible. I was really, really, really shocked. And then I ignored it. I thought, no, this couldn't have happened. And then all of a sudden, the person made another gesture to me. Now, you have to realize, if you're a brahmachari, you're with a group of brahmacharis, we're practicing celibacy. The last thing that you need is homosexual behavior in that ashram. It's actually totally incompatible with the brahmachari ashram. So I just turned on the light in my office and told the person to leave the office right away. I sent him downstairs, go. And the next day, I kicked him out of the temple. Goodbye. No compromise. Because this is the problem. When you start to compromise our philosophy, then you get all of this confusion. There is no room for this. And that's all we have now in the previous movement that I was a member of, the ISKCON movement, is all kinds of compromising. That's all people are doing. And it's not helping anybody. Like, for example, with this Krishna West group. Very compromised group of people with all kinds of compromised principles. This watered down philosophy is not going to enable people to be properly trained. There is a training program in Krishna consciousness. That's what you do with the association. Guru, Shastra, Sadhu. You have people that help each other understand the principles. It's not because we're trying to be mean. I know it's a very controversial issue. Homosex. Like if you bring it up, nowadays I don't even bring it up amongst people I know because you're immediately condemned. If you say anything about that, oh, you can't say that, you're homophobic. So at least we have to use our own discretion in how we present the philosophy to the general public. And my recommendation to all of you is don't enter into that topic. It's not a comfortable topic for us. It's there in our books. We understand the principle, but it is a very volatile subject matter to deal with. Same with the topic of ladies, women. If you start to bring that topic up, Yaśodā, do you think you'll succeed? No. If you bring that topic up to people, you'll be in a fireball of controversy. It's a very difficult, it's not that we don't bring it up in private or in discussion, but in terms of preaching, we should simply stick to the principles of the philosophy that we're not the body, that we're the eternal servants of Krishna, to chant Hare Krishna and follow the regulated principles, etc., etc. So there's an art to preaching. Here Prabhupada says, actually, to hear and explain them, the Acharya or the Goswami must be well acquainted with all of this literary field. To hear and explain them is more important than reading. One can only assimilate the knowledge of the revealed scriptures by hearing and explaining. Hearing is called Shraban, and explaining is called Kirtan. Therefore, these two processes, namely Shraban and Kirtan, are two principal factors in the progressive life. One who has properly grasped the transcendental knowledge from the right source by submissive hearing can only properly explain the subject. So this is our job, is to become expert preachers according to time and circumstance, but certainly not to minimize Prabhupada's presentation in his scriptures, like my friend Garuda has, unfortunately, in this recent publication. I am in contact with Garuda, so everyone knows. And he recently, a few days ago, sent me an email or a text message and said that he does not support any God brothers who are participating in child molestation or sexual abuse. So just so everyone knows. Prabhu, Madhukanta, please, or Jiva Goswami, please. Could you?
I think
Yeah.
Madhu had his hand up.
Okay, please, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I would like to just make a comment. my comment is, I don't understand how anybody can even have this the discussion within ISKCON at all about homosexuality. I thought that the four regulative principles said no illicit sex. Doesn't that just disqualify homosexuality right there? That's just the pure like root of the spiritual life. So it would appear that homosexuality is an illicit sex. It doesn't beget children. So it would seem that it would be completely like a non-issue. Seems to be my understanding. Was that a correct understanding, Prabhu?
It's exactly how I feel. And I've explained it to other people. So yes, it's a simple answer. It's not a question of homosex or heterosex. It's no sex except for procreation. That's our principle. And if you follow it, you'll become empowered. Yes, Jiva Goswami.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I want to take a minute to express my appreciation to all the people who have created this environment for us to gather and to discuss Śrīla Prabhupāda's books and teachings. Viśvakarmā Prabhu, Yaśodā-nandana Prabhu, Vinka Prabhu. You know, there's so many others that have been involved. Dr. Sharma, and on it goes, that I just want to say thank you for having the vision and having the gumption to set up this kind of a program and be willing to take the criticisms from other people in ISKCON, because it is a difficult situation. Many people misunderstand the Ritvik philosophy. They misunderstand the Ritvik people. They think we're just a bunch of critics. And you mentioned war of words. And so all these things I think have nothing to do with our group. And I certainly want to say thank you very much. That's all I had.
Thank you very much, Jiva Goswami. I appreciate that very much for the group. And I also want to say that we're very, very excited to have you and your wife as participants. And it's people like you who give strength to this group and give it a purpose. And compliments to you and your wife for your hard work and your participation in this group. I wanted to make a comment just in terms of what you just said. Yesterday, I got an email from one of my godbrothers. Now, these constant criticisms of us by our godbrothers are quite extensive. It's not just, you're 100% right. Taking this position has created quite a controversy amongst the godbrothers, the people that we knew prior to our involvement with this group, for example, and being having been a devotee for 52 years and Yaśoda this for longer, we do run into a lot of disputes. And there's a devotee in Gainesville, his name is Kirtiraj. And he is a former, how can I say, lieutenant of Hare Krishna. And he was instrumental, along with Hare Krishna, in having Ananda Shanti put in jail in Russia. Now, Ananda Shanti, for those that in this group have never heard of him, when Prabhupada went to Russia, he stayed there, Jiva Goswami, for 4 days. I believe it was 4 days. And he met one Russian person and gave him initiation during that visit. Can you imagine? one person became a Prabhupada disciple, and that was Ananda Shanti. Now, Kirtiraj was involved in dealing with Ananda Shanti and dealing with the Russian government along with Harikesh, and they were partially responsible for him going for 6 years in jail, 2 years being strapped to a table and being ejected by drugs. That's his history. I know that because I had the blessing through Abhimanyu, who was a Russian devotee staying with me, to have me speak to Ananda Shanti ongoing for a few weeks before his passing. I thought it was, you can imagine how honored I was to speak to this person, because, you know, there was a great proliferation of Krishna consciousness in Russia under their development, Harikesh and Kirtiraj. Subsequently, Harikesh fell down as a guru sannyasi and became married or went with a girlfriend who was his massage therapist. And then after that, he's now living in Gainesville or in Alachua with someone else. Anyway, not to get into that, but you can imagine what's happened to the faith of all the Russian devotees that were committed to him, and now have lost that faith and have left Krishna consciousness. I'm very familiar with what's going on in the Russian yatra, which is collapsing, by the way. This Bhaktivedanta, he's now left Russia and being pursued by the KGB, or it's called FSB, for fraud and other things. You know, there's a real problem. So with Kirtiraj, I've been sending them the information, and he wrote back to me last night, Jiva Goswami, he goes, by the way, I don't agree with a lot of things that you're saying, and please don't send me any more information. Just stop sending me stuff. Okay, this isn't the first time that he's done this to me. Tell me to don't want anything to do with you because you're explaining something I don't want to hear. So you're absolutely right. When we get involved in this type of process of trying to explain the truth according to the way Prabhupada presented it to us, and which we're trying to share with everybody in these last few years of our life, it's not that it's going to go without dispute. That's okay. People are entitled to their disputes. It's like the Republicans and the Democrats in America. It goes on and on and on and on and on. So in this particular situation, yes, there is going to be a dispute, but at the same time, there is a disappointment because we see that Prabhupada's mission has been adulterated by all of these opinions that have come from these zonal guru acharyas that exist in our movement, which have no authorized position. So I know it was a long story, but I wanted to share it with our group, just so you know, this does not go without harassment and without criticism from a lot of people. Yaśodā-nandana Prabhu, could you comment?
One point is, in this movement, obviously, when you preach to the public, there's a certain philosophy that Prabhupada presented. Prabhupada requested his disciples to live in a certain way. Now, when you preach in regular society, there is many, as everybody knows, many different points of view about relationship between men to men, men to women, family life, children. Prabhupada was presenting a Vedic point of view, specifically the philosophy that he heard from his guru. Now, the point was made by Madhukanta Prabhu that one of the principles is no illicit sex, that sex life is not against religious principles, but it should be done for creating children. That there is no such thing as procreating children with sex between a man to a man or a woman to a woman. That doesn't exist. Now, this is a modern propaganda for sense gratification. But the Vedic principle is that proper family life should be done according to the Vedic principle. This is the philosophy. Now, Prabhupada presented the philosophy, but that goes into a conflict with modern propaganda, sense gratification propaganda, that everything is okay. You could have sex with animals, sex with men to men, everything, but that is not the natural way. As a matter of fact, when you look at the history of all these different scriptures, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, the Buddhist scriptures, and any other, none of them allow or condone this sex between man to man or women to women. It's always a man with a woman properly married for procreating children. That is the purpose of sex life. Now there's a new philosophy, a sense gratification philosophy that has been promoted in human society. But this is not what Prabhupada was giving. So all the devotees have contributed to this. This is very important point. And our movement has been deeply conflicting over this issue, as we know from the history of what has happened. And a lot of it is the leaders do not study the philosophy that Prabhupada is given. They should educate themselves as to what Prabhupada factually says and why he is taking that position. He's presenting something, some valuable information. Now, if somebody is not able to follow that, it doesn't, and if wants to be a devotee, okay, you can be a sympathizer or a supporter, but you cannot be a real devotee of Krishna if you're going to engage in these illicit activities. Yes, Jiva Goswami Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I just wanted to give a personal explanation of my experience with this particular issue of illicit sex. I grew up in the 60s, and I first met the devotees in 1969 on Hollywood Boulevard when I was in the throes of pursuing illicit sex. And for much of my life, I did that. And I can say that following Prabhupada's instruction in a marriage that I currently have with my wonderful wife, Founder-Ācārya, that my life has become glorious because I follow this principle of no illicit sex. And we were married later in life. There was no question of procreation. And so therefore, following this no illicit sex has led to an incredibly deep and wonderful relationship. And I give all glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda for presenting so strongly and clearly this concept.
Very good. Bhakta Ulysses, you raised your hand. Go ahead, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Please accept my humble obeisances. One comment I want to add to this topic of leaders in a conversation, Śrīla Prabhupada explains who is leader. And basically he defines all my disciples are leaders as much as they follow purely. So this is I find the easiest way to understand who should be leader, because, for example, we're talking about Garuda Das, and he's not shaving, he's not wearing tilak, he's appearing in public interviews, but he's not even doing a basic ornament of devotee. So another point that's very easy to tell is, like, if you study all of the Prabhupada's disciples, who is saying Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasin? I can count them with the fingers of my hand. There's very little of those from all the disciples who are actually remain humble and offer obeisances. So in this way, I think leadership should be defined. And then we go into other topics like Varnashram, the self-sufficient farms. There's so many ways to easily filter out who should be leader and who should be not. That is, I think, part of the essential discussion when there's a devotee assembly, that in between the devotees, they should agree who is the leader of this assembly. This is a very important point, because here I'm seeing, for example, Viśvakarmā yesterday saying we should not read any books at all, except Prabhupada's books. And then today Yaśodā-nandana is saying we should read Prabhupada's books scrutinizingly. And maybe if you're already done that, you can venture into reading other books. So therefore, even in this small group, we can see two different opinions. So who is leader? Who is qualified to lead? This is a very important topic in between the assembly of devotees. There's countless valuable books from the 6 Goswamis, Hari Bhakti Vilas, Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and I quoted yesterday to Viśvakarmā, Chaitanya Bhagavat is praised so highly in Chaitanya Charitamrita by the author himself. So if we disregard these books and we say, oh, well, they're useless, all the works of the Goswamis, we don't dare to study, that would be also offensive, because Lord Chaitanya directly instructed them, please write this book. So how would we ever be in a position to neglect such wonderful books? Thank you.
Well, first of all, let me just say this. I think you misrepresented what I said about other books, but that's a separate discussion. With regard to Garuda, these various comments that have been made, we don't usually give the names of devotees publicly, people who have advocated different positions with regards to the former society that we used to belong to. Garuda is some kind of scholar at Washington University and Berkeley University. He does his preaching, and basically Garuda is trying to support the idea of presenting Prabhupada's original unedited books. He's doing some service with regards to that. As far as whether he has tilak or shaven head and everything, well, he's preaching in some kind of a academic environment. That's something he has to decide what is the best appropriate dress or hairstyle. Best if he could do tilak and shaven heads, but the current circumstances, he has to decide for himself what he's going to do. With regards to Viśvakarmā and myself, there's no contradiction between what he says and what I said. We are of the position that Prabhupada is given, that Prabhupada has many times specified in different letters and different instruction that we should primarily study his books, and these are sufficient for the study and propagation of Krishna consciousness. Now, because nowadays there is a lot of different devotees go on beyond Prabhupada's books. And my question is, for example, Chaitanya Bhagavat has been translated into English by some devotees. My understanding, I don't know which group they're from, but there are some good. They've tried to do some good work. But if we study Prabhupada's teachings, Prabhupada's books and instructions, we will get the essence of all these different shastras. Now, as far as the authenticity of these translations, this is one very important point. How bona fide are these translations? Some of these literatures were written in Sanskrit, Bengali, Braja Bhasha, and what is the level of experience, realization, and qualification of people who have translated those? Prabhupada personally told me sent me a letter along with Guru Kripa in December of 1973 that whatever is to be learned of the teachings of Bhaktivedanta Thakur can be learned from our books, and said there's no need whatsoever for outside instruction. So you're raising some points, and there is other conversations which Śrīla Prabhupada said that he never said that it's not okay to read other Vaishnavas' books, other Acharya's books. And I mean, people can discuss that in various ways. What I suggest you should do, if you're interested in this topic, why don't you go and compile all of Prabhupada's statements about this issue? And then we can have an educated discussion. All of Prabhupada's statements about other books, my books, and everything. And then we can have a factual discussion. Yes, Viśvakarmā, your hand is up. Hare Krishna.
Yes, I wanted to clarify a point here that Prabhupada did make exceptions, Ulysses, to some of his disciples to study other books of the Acharyas. Yes. As in the case also of Pradyumna, and also in the position of Yaśodā-nandana Prabhu, who is recognized within the ISKCON movement as a scholar in our philosophy. So there are exceptions to the rules. This, you have to, unfortunately, some of us, some of our group members never had personal association with Śrīla Prabhupada, which we were fortunate enough to have. So there has to be some common sense, Ulysses, in terms of understanding these statements. Like, for example, Yashoda's statement today, where he's saying, reading these other books. This is a specific point that we're making is, you may undertake to read these other books. Like I asked Bhakta Peter, have you read all of Prabhupada's books? I could ask you the same question. Have you read all of Prabhupada's books? Have you read Chaitanya Charitamrita, the entire 17 volumes? Have you read all of the 18,000 verses of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and studied all the purports? Have you read all of Prabhupada's conversations? There are 37 volumes of them. Have you read all of the letters that Prabhupada, there's 7,000 letters? Have you listened to all his lectures? Do you have a complete understanding of Prabhupada's teachings? To me, a lot of these people that come with our group, they look at this thing from a very sort of shallow point of view. They extract, they take specific quotes and create their own opinions on what they think is right when they haven't got a clue what they're talking about. They're absolutely clueless in Seattle because they don't really have a history of devotional service. Like I ask people, what have you done? Sometimes online, you make all these opinions. Have you ever done anything? What has been your sacrifice in your life? And don't try to minimize everybody, that everybody is the same. That is also false ego. You know, that it's not like that. And if people think that because someone speaks something to promote Prabhupada as guru, to promote Prabhupada's books, to promote the process of Krishna consciousness, it's his opinion. It's not his opinion. Here I see a comment here, opinions are okay, but doesn't mean your opinion I have to follow. Opinion is not okay. Opinion is just a whimsical statement from the mind. That is not a shastric statement, but instructions from the spiritual master. And the repetition of those instructions by his disciples, which is all of us, is not an opinion, it's a fact. Opinion has no value. Everybody has an opinion, just like there are aromas in the air, but facts are much different. So for someone to make a statement like opinions are okay, that is offensive in this community of devotees. And it shows their shallow perception and understanding of Krishna consciousness. This is not a group of opinions. Yaśodā.
Well, this is an important point, because the reason I brought up this point earlier about compiling various references from Śrīla Prabhupada about my books, Acharya's books, because it's not enough for people just to say, I've got a question, I've got an opinion, I think this, I think that. Well, that's nice. We appreciate the contribution to the discussion. But in order to be able to reach proper conclusion based on Śrīla Prabhupada's teachings, it's necessary for devotees to do the necessary background study, the background research. Otherwise, it goes into the realm of speculation and opinion. It's just like when we read Bhagavad Gita, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Śrīla Prabhupada has given many classes on many of these verses that we're reading. Has everybody gone through all of Prabhupada's conversations? I personally have studied these large volumes, like there's 7 or 8 or 9 volumes, 2-3 inches thick, of all the conversations, all the lectures on Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, same thing for Bhagavad Gita. So if somebody is serious about Prabhupada's teachings, first, we have to study what Prabhupada has done. Let me give you an example. In the Vaishnava Sampradayas of the Madhvas, they have Madhvaj commentaries on Vedanta Sutra. And the way they study, then they have commentaries of Jayatirtha, the next major commentator on the Madhva Sampradaya. Then they have the commentaries of Vyasatirtha, and they have a lot of other great acharyas who have written commentaries, like Raghavendra Swami Vijayendra Tirtha. Same thing, the same thing with the Ramanuja Sampradaya. There's Ramanuja, who wrote the Sri Bhashya. Then there's Sudarshan Shuri, who wrote a commentary on the Sri Bhashya. And there's other great acharyas in their Sampradaya who have written very elaborate commentaries on these commentaries. In our Sampradaya, we have a great wealth of information, especially in the last few acharyas. Bhaktivedanta Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta, and Prabhupada. Prabhupada one time wrote about Bhaktisiddhanta, says you cannot understand his writings unless you understand it from me. Prabhupada said you can study his Brahma Samhita. He published that. There are many available resources of Bhaktisiddhanta's writings online and different things. I guess my point is, first, the devotee should have the decency and intelligence to study Prabhupada's teachings, all of Prabhupada's teachings, all the books, all the conversations, all the letters. And then after that, but again, where do you get an authorized translation? If somebody is not a Sanskrit or Bengali scholar, how do you know that what you're reading is accurate, is a proper translation of the original Sanskrit text or Bengali text? Yes, Ulysses, you have your hand up.
Let's have Venkat. Venkat,
Okay.
please.
Oh, Venkat, Hare Krishna.
Yes,
Venkat.
Prabhu. If we just look at that quote again that we looked at the beginning, Prabhupada is very clear. He says, these 4 works are sufficient. And he also says, if one studies a particular book, he must do so thoroughly. That is the principle. By thoroughly studying a limited number of books, one can understand the philosophy. So one should not partially study a book just to pose oneself as a great scholar by being able to refer to scriptures. And so from this, we understand we have to first scrutinizingly study these 4 books. I mean, that's the instruction of our spiritual master. And the other point is, in many places, Prabhupada says, I don't have it readily in front of me, but he says that without guru, you cannot study Vedas or anything by yourself. I mean, we're not qualified. So that I feel that applies even to the writings of the 6 Goswamis or anyone. Without guru, without his purports, his him telling us, we cannot independently study. We might not even understand the actual meaning of those things. So that's the point I wanted to make.
Okay, thank you. What we're going to do is we're moving to the end of today's discussions. We'll take Bhakti Ulysses' comment or question, hopefully, humbly, and then we'll move towards the end of the class. Bhakti Ulysses, please.
Hare Krishna. I've tried to be humble. Please forgive me. So I'm very happy to hear the conclusion, which is very mature. So this is the benefit of sincere association of devotees. I have one question that is dear to my heart because I've been listening and been benefited by the lectures of Śrīla Govinda Swami. And as far as I understand, he was directly instructed by Śrīla Prabhupada to accept disciples. Not that he was, I don't know about the whole discussion that if he was meant to be Acharya or not, but as far as I know, he was instructed to accept disciples, which would make him a bona fide guru. So I would like to hear your opinion on this.
Do you have any documentation on that? I've heard that story before.
Yes, Govinda Swami.
Hold on.
Presented.
He was
Yeah.
voted in by the GBC. In
Yes,
1993,
100%.
I went with Puranjan. We had a long discussion with Gaur Govinda about this whole guru appointment issue. He admitted to us this whole idea of guru appointment is bogus. But he accepted his guru position in ISKCON by a vote of the GBC.
Then
hold on, let me finish. Then the story came out that he had this conversation with Prabhupada along with some other devotees, but there's no record of any of these stories. Whether it is true story or a fabricated story, we don't know. What we do know is from the record in 1977, there's no record of Prabhupada choosing, nominating, selecting, appointing, whichever term you want to use, any of his disciples as Diksha Guru or Diksha Acharya. If somebody can prove that from all the statements of Prabhupada in 1977, welcome. The GBC has been trying to prove that for 45 years. Nobody's been able to do it. So that story has been debunked. I just want to make another point about Gaur Govinda. He was at odds with the other GBCs in ISKCON for criticizing many of the things we're doing. In 1993, when we saw him, he told us that the ISKCON institution has been infiltrated by the elements of Kali. That Kali has infiltrated the highest offices in that institution. So he was greatly at odds with these people in ISKCON. But the story you've told here, get it out of your head. There's no proof of it. Focus on Prabhupada.
Thank you very much, Yasoda. Go ahead, please. Finish.
Yeah, that's it. I'm done. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for participating today in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam class. It was a very invigorating and informative and enlivening, I hope, for many of you, session. This is the purpose of our group, the Prabhupada Disciples Association. And we want to encourage you. By the way, our Prabhupada Disciples Association is expanding rapidly on Facebook. There's over 100 requests a week now for people to join our group. So we're slowly expanding our influence in that medium. And we're also, as all of you know, we're planning to expand our presence in YouTube with this our Prabhupada TV. And if you get a chance, I did, thanks to our Bhaktivedanta, I did look at the Zoom broadcast, and it's very, very enlivening to see us advance in the technology world with our presentation of Krishna Consciousness globally. A lot of people cannot attend the classes that are scheduled, but I'm noticing as well that many people are watching the classes during their own time zone with their ability to spend that time because some of these classes, as you know, this was a bit longer today, which is quite all right, because that's the nature of this particular segment of our programming, is to be able to discuss these issues and this philosophy in detail with those people that want to spend time during the week in this type of environment. But we will be presenting different formats and other ways of delivering our message online and to other people as we move forward with our development of the Prabhupada Disciples Association programs. So thank you everyone again. It was again very enlivening and informative to have all of you participating. And we'll move forward now with the Kirtan. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda, all glories to the Sankirtan movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavenibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. All
Hare
glories-
Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
We'll see everyone on Wednesday. Hare Krishna.
Wednesday.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yaśodā-nandana
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu.
Back to Godhead.